Life, the first to happen since the Supreme Court's reversal of Roe v. Wade, the decision that legalized abortion nationwide. In California, they will be gathering in the wake of the passage of Prop 1, which codified the right to that procedure here, and in the face of a very active reproductive freedom movement. Here to share the ways that movement is expanding and how California is mobilizing to ensure abortion access to women across the country is Jody Hicks, President and CEO of Planned Parenthood Affiliates of California. Jody, good morning to you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Definitely. First, I have to ask, we are 8 months past the reversal of Roe v. Wade and the implementation of all of the restrictions we talked about last year that were standing at the ready through trigger laws in several states based on the reversal. How do you see the situation regarding abortion in the country right now?
Well, I think it's still dire for people. Nobody should have to travel outside of the zip code that they live in order to receive care, and that's happening all across the country. I think we're fortunate in California. We've been planning and making the right investments to ensure that people can get care, whether they're here in California or they have to come from another state. But it's still not okay, and it's certainly not the will of the people nationally that really did want a protection like Roe v. Wade to stay in place.
California created the Future of Abortion Council to put a forward-thinking and acting spin on what providers should continue to happen here despite what would happen nationally. Now there's a new coalition that's just been established, one involving 20 states. It's called the Reproductive Freedom Alliance. What do you think about this development, and how might Planned Parenthood here interact with or support the alliance?
It's wonderful, first of all, and Planned Parenthood has been doing something similar with our affiliates throughout the country and sharing information and meeting with states that are still providing access to abortion in their state. And so it makes sense that policymakers would do the same thing, as almost half the country will institute some type of ban for abortion care in their state. The other states that are providing that care are impacted. So it makes sense for states to band together, to share information, to understand best practices, all the things that really we've been doing with the Future of Abortion Council here in California, but just sharing with other states as they're having the same impact as we are here in California.
At one time, PPAC was seeing a significant number of women from out of state, especially from Texas, after the passage of the heartbeat law there, coming here for abortion care. With this Reproductive Freedom Alliance, is there a hope that the sort of weight of trying to field all of those appointments, all of that need, may be shared more equally as the word gets out that these other states are also safe places to go?
Yeah, I think there's a hope that as we have more information or we understand the experiences of other states, that we're learning from them. And that was true when Texas went into effect. We were learning right away from some of the neighboring states and what was happening in their states. And we were taking that information and being forward thinking in the investments we made here in California. And so that will continue to happen. I think that there is a lot of information to still be had. There's a lot of protections to be instituted for providers, and we'll just continue to do that work. And anything they can do collectively and together will just make it better certainly for patients across the country.
What's one of those kind of protections for providers that you think needs to be implemented?
Well, certainly they need to ensure that as providers are providing care that's legal in their state, that no other state will try and institute or move into that state or take action against providers that are providing care. And same for patients, criminalizing patients as they are forced to travel across state lines in order to get that care, and getting that care from a provider, making sure that they have protections that they need, that patients have privacy that they need with their health information. There's a lot of things that we've been doing here in California, and we're also learning from other states and how to ensure that both patients and providers are able to provide care, receive care, get the care that they need with privacy, with protections, and that they're not harassed, that they're secure and safe.
Last Friday, 12 blue states filed what might be a possible hedge lawsuit to one a Texas judge is expected to rule on, one filed by anti-abortion activists trying to block the abortion bill altogether by canceling its FDA approval. In their suit, these 12 blue states say the FDA is already too strict in limiting the abortion drug mifepristone. The attack on the pill is something you saw coming if Roe was reversed.
That's absolutely right. And I think it just goes to show that when they attacked Roe and tried to say it was about states' rights, that wasn't true. They will continue to do things like attacking access to abortion medication that will affect even states like California that has spoken loud and clear that they want reproductive freedom protections. So we know that they'll continue to do that. We've been planning and preparing and investing to ensure that medication abortion will still be available here in the state of California. But it's unfortunate that they continue to do these attacks that really harm people's access to procedures that are life-saving oftentimes. And so we'll continue to do the work that we do, but I think it's important to recognize that when they say it's about states' rights, that's not what they mean, that they'll continue to do what they can or what they're able to do to try and attack access to abortion. And we just have to do everything we can to fight back.
A lot of people thought the reversal of Roe would be the end of a discussion, and nothing has quieted down since then. So, of course, we'll have you back to talk more about these issues as they keep coming up. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much for having me.